For 3 years, Miriam Thomas believed her marriage was built on faith, love, and devotion. But one shocking discovery shattered that illusion forever. Her pastor husband, the man she trusted, was entangled in a forbidden triangle that involved his own brother and their teenage son. When the truth surfaced, Miriam's faith turned to fury, and that fury turned deadly. What happens when the people we admire most, the ones sworn to protect and guide us, become the very monsters hiding in plain sight? This story is not just about betrayal, it's about the devastating consequences of secrets, the collapse of family trust, and a woman pushed beyond the limits of human endurance. Miriam Thomas's life is a chilling reminder that sometimes, the truth can be far more dangerous than lies. Before we dive deep into this unbelievable true crime story, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our community where we uncover shocking tales of betrayal, deception, and crime. Trust me, you don't want to miss the twists in this one. To everyone in Houston, Texas, the Thomas family was the embodiment of grace and godliness. Pastor Elijah Thomas, age 45, was more than just a preacher, he was a symbol of authority, discipline, and inspiration. His voice carried conviction from the pulpit, and when he spoke, the congregation leaned forward, hanging on to every word. With his neatly trimmed beard, sharp suits, and the aura of spiritual confidence, Elijah was admired by men and adored by women. He was the man husbands wanted to emulate, and the man mothers secretly wished their daughters would marry. Standing faithfully beside him was his wife, Miriam Thomas, age 42. She was elegant but modest, always dressed in simple church-appropriate gowns with carefully tied headscarves. To the congregation, she was the model pastor's wife, gentle, supportive, and prayerful. Miriam carried herself with dignity, smiling at everyone, extending hugs to those in need, and quietly managing the women's fellowship. She lived her life in service to her husband and the church, believing that her marriage was blessed and ordained. Elijah's younger brother, Aaron Thomas, age 39, was also a familiar face in the ministry. Though he lacked Elijah's commanding presence, Aaron had a quiet charm that drew people in. He was often in the background, assisting in church programs, managing the youth choir, and balancing church finances. Whenever Elijah preached, Aaron sat attentively on the front row, nodding along as if echoing every sermon. To outsiders, he was the loyal brother, always supportive, always present. Then there was Nathaniel Thomas, Elijah and Miriam's only child. At 19, Nathaniel was the pride of the household. Bright, articulate, and charismatic, he seemed destined to follow in his father's footsteps. He led the youth Bible studies, played the keyboard during Sunday services, and had the kind of charm that made both parents beam with pride. To neighbors and church members, the Thomas family was picture-perfect. They lived in a spacious parsonage provided by the church, white brick walls, a neatly trimmed lawn, and a driveway where Elijah's black SUV often sat gleaming. On Sunday mornings, the family would step out together, their clothing coordinated, their steps in sync, the image of unity. Behind the pulpit, Elijah often used his family as examples. He would say, "My marriage is a testament to God's faithfulness. My wife is my crown, my son is my joy, and my brother is my trusted partner in the vineyard of the Lord." The congregation would applaud, inspired by his words. Young couples envied them. Older couples respected them. Mothers pointed to them as the ideal Christian family. But beneath the smiles and sermons, Miriam sometimes sensed an invisible wall in her home. It started with little things: Elijah's late nights at church, Aaron's frequent visits at odd hours, Nathaniel's sudden mood swings. Still, she silenced her doubts, convincing herself it was simply the pressure of ministry life. She had learned long ago that questioning Elijah's choices was not wise. He was, after all, a man of God. Yet, deep within her, a small unease grew. She noticed the way Elijah sometimes avoided her gaze, how conversations between Aaron and Nathaniel would fall silent when she entered the room, how laughter would stop abruptly, replaced by awkwardness. Still, she buried it all, telling herself, "This is a blessed home. This is God's chosen family." Nothing can be wrong. In the eyes of the world, the Thomas family radiated perfection. But Miriam could not shake the whisper in her spirit, something was not as it seemed. And soon, that whisper would grow into a scream. At first, Miriam convinced herself she was simply imagining things. She told herself that Elijah's late nights and distant behavior were natural, after all, he was a pastor. Ministry was demanding. Sermons needed preparation. Members needed counseling. Churches didn't run themselves. But still, the unease lingered. It was small things at first. Elijah had always been affectionate, the type of husband who placed his hand gently on her back in public or whispered prayers with her before bed. But gradually, those small gestures vanished. He no longer lingered after dinner. He no longer shared quiet jokes with her before sleep. Instead, his nights stretched longer. He would retreat to his study, claiming he had urgent calls with church leaders or prayer sessions that required his solitude. Some nights, Miriam would drift awake at 3 a.m. only to find the other side of the bed still cold and untouched. When she asked, Elijah's responses were sharp and dismissive. "Why do you question me, Miriam? Don't you trust me? My work is for the Lord. Or do you think I'm wasting my time?" The rebuke silenced her. How could she, the pastor's wife, doubt the man who stood before thousands proclaiming righteousness? To question him was to question the very foundation of their faith. But Miriam noticed more. Aaron, Elijah's younger brother, had begun to appear far too often. He would arrive late at night, sometimes long after Miriam had gone to bed. At first, she thought it was just the closeness of siblings. But when it became routine, her suspicions deepened. Elijah would simply say, "Aaron is helping me with church matters," but never explained further. Then there was Nathaniel. Her son had always been warm, open, and full of youthful energy. But around the age of 18, Miriam noticed a shift. He avoided her questions, his responses curt, his eyes sometimes filled with a strange guilt she couldn't explain. He often retreated into his room, locking the door for long stretches. And though he was active in the church, he seemed oddly detached at home. Once, Miriam tried to reach out. "Nathaniel," she said softly, standing in his doorway. "You've been distant. Is something wrong? You can always talk to me." But Nathaniel simply gave a strained smile. "I'm fine, Mom. Just school and church stuff. Don't worry." Something in his tone, however, told her there was more beneath the surface. It was during these months that Miriam began to feel the weight of loneliness in her own home. She lived under the same roof with her husband, brother-in-law, and son, yet she felt more like a stranger than a wife or mother. The community, of course, saw none of this. To the congregation, the Thomas were perfect. At Sunday service, Elijah's hand rested on Nathaniel's shoulder proudly, while Aaron sat faithfully in the front pew, nodding as his brother preached. From the outside, they looked like a fortress of faith. But behind closed doors, Miriam felt something dark pressing in on her. It was more than marital distance. More than teenage rebellion. More than family closeness. It was something unexplainable, something hidden just beneath the surface, like a serpent coiled in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. And though she didn't know it yet, Miriam's instincts were right. The cracks in her marriage were not simply cracks. They were fractures hiding a devastating secret, one that would soon tear her world apart. It was a night Miriam Thomas would never forget. The sky above Houston was heavy with rain, clouds splitting open as thunder rolled across the city. Miriam had been attending a women's fellowship meeting at the church that evening, leading prayers and encouraging other wives about faith and family. By all appearances, she was the steadfast pastor's wife, the rock behind her husband's ministry. But halfway through the service, she realized she had forgotten her phone charger at home. With her battery already drained, she decided to slip away early, telling the women she'd return later. The drive home was short, but uneasiness settled in her chest as she approached the parsonage. It was dark except for a soft light seeping from the master bedroom window upstairs. Elijah was home, she thought. Perhaps working late, or preparing tomorrow's sermon. She parked quietly, her heels clicking softly on the wet pavement as she entered the house. Inside, the air was thick with silence, too silent. She set her purse down and began climbing the stairs. Halfway up, she froze. There was a sound. A muffled, rhythmic sound that made her skin prickle. At first, she thought it might be the television left on too loud. But as she moved closer, her breath caught in her throat. These were not the sounds of preaching. Nor of prayer. These were sounds of intimacy. Her heart hammered in her chest. No. No, it can't be. With trembling hands, she pressed herself against the wall just outside the master bedroom door. The voices were clearer now, low moans, soft groans, the unmistakable cadence of something forbidden. Miriam's vision blurred with tears as she reached for the doorknob. Her hand shook violently, but she turned it slowly, pushing the door open just enough to peer inside. And what she saw shattered her soul. There, on the bed where she had once been cherished as a wife, lay her husband, Pastor Elijah Thomas. His body entwined not with a stranger, not with some hidden mistress, but with two people who should have been untouchable. His younger brother, Aaron Thomas, was there, his shirt discarded, his movements intimate. And in the middle of them, gasping and trembling, was her 19-year-old son, Nathaniel. Miriam's knees buckled. The world spun. Her breath turned into a silent scream that refused to escape her lips. She clutched the doorframe for balance, her entire body convulsing as if struck by lightning. Elijah's voice, low and commanding, filled her ears. "You're mine, both of you. This is our bond. No one must ever know." Miriam staggered backward, nearly tripping over her own feet. She pressed a trembling hand over her mouth to keep from crying out. Her chest felt as though it was splitting open, her heart clawing against her ribs in agony. Her mind screamed, "This is not real. This is a nightmare. God, wake me up. Please, let me wake up." But it was real. The man she had loved for 20 years. The brother-in-law she had trusted. The son she had raised. Together in an unholy act that defied everything she believed in. Tears streamed down her face. She stumbled down the hallway, her sobs muffled by trembling hands. She locked herself in the guest room, collapsing onto the floor, shaking uncontrollably. Every image was seared into her memory, the sweat, the whispers, the betrayal. It burned in her mind like fire. That night, Miriam did not sleep. She lay curled in the corner of the guest room, rocking back and forth, praying to a God who suddenly felt very far away. By dawn, her world was no longer the same. The illusion of the perfect family had been ripped away. The facade of holiness had crumbled into dust. And Miriam Thomas knew, with a crushing certainty, that her life would never be the same again. The morning after that horrific discovery, Miriam Thomas sat at the dining table with a blank stare. The cup of tea in front of her had long gone cold, but she hadn't taken a sip. Her hands trembled as she tried to steady her breathing. From the kitchen, she could hear Elijah humming softly as though nothing had happened the night before. He emerged, dressed neatly in his gray suit, Bible tucked under his arm. His eyes met hers briefly. "You didn't sleep in our room," he said, his tone sharp, almost accusatory. Miriam's lips quivered, but no words came. Elijah leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Miriam, you saw something you shouldn't have. And let me be very clear, what happens in this house stays in this house." Her eyes widened. "Elijah, that was our son." Her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. His face hardened, his eyes cold. "Nathaniel is fine. Aaron is fine. And you will not speak of this again. Do you understand me? Do not destroy everything we've built because of your emotions. The words stung deeper than knives. There was no remorse. No shame. Only control. Miriam looked toward Nathaniel's room, hoping, praying, that her son would come out, explain, deny, something. But when Nathaniel emerged, his face was pale, eyes avoiding hers, lips pressed tight. He wouldn't look at her. He wouldn't speak. He just grabbed his backpack and left the house. Her heart shattered again. Days turned into weeks, and Miriam lived in silence. She tried to confront Aaron once, catching him alone in the church office. "Aaron," she whispered, voice trembling. How could you betray me like this?" Aaron looked at her, his expression unreadable. He leaned in and spoke coldly. "Miriam, you don't know what you think you know. And if you care about this church, you'll keep your mouth shut." The message was clear: Elijah had turned both his brother and son against her. Miriam's world grew smaller. At church, she plastered on a smile, greeting members as though everything was fine. But inside, she was breaking. Every sermon Elijah preached about holiness felt like mockery. Every time Nathaniel called his father a man of God, her stomach twisted. At night, she lay awake, replaying the images in her mind. Her once sacred home now felt like a prison, and her family, the people she had trusted most, had become strangers. Miriam Thomas was trapped in a nightmare, one she could tell no one about. For the first time in her life, she questioned everything: her faith, her marriage, even her sanity. And with each passing day, the silence grew heavier, pressing down on her chest, suffocating her spirit. The night of their 20th wedding anniversary was supposed to be a celebration. Elijah had organized a dinner in the church hall, inviting elders, deacons, and close friends. He stood at the podium, his hand resting lightly on Miriam's shoulder as he praised her in front of the congregation. "This woman," he declared, smiling broadly, "is my crown. For 20 years, she has stood by me, prayed for me, and raised our son to be a man of God. I am blessed beyond measure." The room erupted in applause. Miriam forced a smile, but inside, her heart was in ashes. Every word Elijah spoke felt like a cruel performance, a mask hiding the filth she knew too well. When the dinner ended, they returned home. Aaron was there, as usual, along with Nathaniel. The three men laughed in the living room, sipping wine, discussing upcoming church events as though life was normal. But for Miriam, something inside her had finally snapped. She slipped quietly into the kitchen, her hands trembling as she reached for the largest knife in the drawer. The weight of it felt heavy, almost unnatural in her grip. For a long moment, she stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Then she stepped into the living room. "Elijah," she said, her voice low and shaking, "you destroyed me. You destroyed everything." Elijah looked up, frowning. "Miriam, put that down. Don't be foolish." But before he could rise, she lunged. The blade sank into his chest, the sound sharp and sickening. His eyes widened in disbelief as he stumbled backward, blood seeping through his shirt. Aaron jumped up, shouting, "Are you crazy?" He rushed toward her, but Miriam turned the knife on him with a cry that came from deep within her soul. She struck again and again until Aaron collapsed beside his brother, gasping his last breath. Nathaniel screamed, "Mom! Stop!" His voice cracked, filled with horror. Miriam turned to her son, her hands dripping red. For a moment, her resolve faltered. This was her child, the boy she had carried, nursed, and loved. But then the images of that night came flooding back, the betrayal, the silence, the complicity. With trembling hands, she whispered, "I can't live with this. I can't." And with one final thrust, she silenced him too. The house fell quiet. The laughter that had once filled the walls was gone, replaced by the heavy sound of Miriam's sobs. She dropped the knife, collapsing onto the floor, her body shaking uncontrollably. The perfect family was no more. The screams that night echoed down the quiet Houston street. Neighbors had heard the chaos, but by the time the police arrived, the Thomas home was already soaked in silence. Officers pushed through the front door and were met with a scene that froze them in place. Elijah and Aaron lay sprawled across the living room floor, their shirts stained crimson. Nathaniel's body rested nearby, his youthful face forever stilled. Blood pooled beneath them, the stench of iron thick in the air. And on the couch sat Miriam. Her hands were coated in red, the knife resting on the carpet beside her. Her eyes were blank, unfocused, as though she were staring into some faraway place where no one could follow. "Ma'am, drop the weapon," one officer barked. But Miriam didn't move. She didn't fight. She didn't plead. She simply whispered, her voice broken, "They destroyed me." She was handcuffed and taken away as neighbors gathered outside, whispering in disbelief. To them, the Thomas had been perfect, the family everyone envied. And now, their home was a crime scene. In court, prosecutors painted Miriam as a jealous, unstable woman who snapped under the pressure of living in her husband's shadow. They spoke of rage, control, and cold-blooded murder. But Miriam's defense told a different story. They revealed the secret she had carried, the night she discovered her husband Elijah, his brother Aaron, and their son Nathaniel in an unholy act. Gasps filled the courtroom as the details emerged. Some refused to believe it. Not Pastor Elijah, church members whispered from the gallery. He was a man of God. Others sat in stunned silence, realizing the facade had been nothing more than a mask. Miriam herself remained quiet through most of the trial. She did not deny the killings. She did not beg for forgiveness. When asked why she did it, she simply said, "I couldn't live with the lies anymore. I couldn't let it continue." The jury deliberated for hours, torn between sympathy and condemnation. In the end, Miriam was found guilty of 3 counts of murder. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In her cell, Miriam became a shadow of who she once was. She no longer smiled, no longer prayed aloud, no longer spoke of her faith. She spent her days staring at the walls, replaying the horrors of her life, the betrayal, the silence, the blood. Outside, Grace of Light Church fell into chaos. Attendance dropped, the congregation split, and whispers of Elijah's secret life refused to die down. For many, the Thomas family's tragedy was not just a scandal, it was proof that sometimes the darkest sins hide behind the brightest lights. Miriam Thomas was left to carry both her grief and her guilt, condemned not only by the court but by the memory of the family she had lost. Miriam Thomas's story is not just about murder. It is about betrayal on the deepest level. It is about secrets so twisted that they destroyed an entire family. It is about a woman who felt silenced, shamed, and broken until she could no longer bear the weight. In the end, 3 lives were lost, and 1 was condemned forever. Behind the walls of a prison cell, Miriam carries both her grief and her guilt, a chilling reminder of how dark secrets can destroy everything we hold dear. What do you think? Was Miriam justified in her actions after discovering such an unthinkable betrayal, or should she have chosen another way to deal with the horror she uncovered? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for staying with us through this chilling story. If you found this video thought-provoking, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. We share true crime stories that uncover the darkest corners of human nature. Until next time, stay safe, and always remember, secrets never stay buried forever.